Hello and welcome to another episode of Rosenberg and Estes' podcast, Inside R&E. My name is Adam Sanders. I'm a member in the firm's transaction department, specializing in acquisition sales, financing, joint ventures, opportunity zones, and local law 97. My guest today is Michael Feldman. Michael is the co-founder and CEO of Choice New York Companies, Choice NY Property Management, LLC, Golden Choice Property Management, Staffing by Choice, and Home by Choice Real Estate Brokerage. Together, these companies provide an array of third-party real estate services, such as property management, building staffing, and residential brokerage for medium and large-scale buildings in New York City. We are thrilled to have him today, and I'm especially thrilled because he's a fellow Marylander, and as well, we are both second-generation colleagues as our fathers worked together many years ago. Welcome, Michael Feldman.
Pleasure to be here.
Yes. So, Michael, let's start off first of all. So you helped to grow and grew a property management company. So why don't you first kind of explain how you got into property management and kind of those first few steps you took to the point you realized you could start buying or at least merging or developing into a larger company.
Yeah, well, that's a simple question, long answer, but I
Go
was
ahead.
I was moving from LA. I was in the movie business. This is the shorter version, doing production work on major Hollywood films. Uh, and everyone said it's so different to come from, Hollywood business, movie business to property management, but to me it was very similar because I was doing location scouting there, first production assistant location scouting, which is a lot of logistics. It's what I call high volume task management, as opposed to like developer client who's looking at 400 deals to do one. I get to cross off a lot of things from my to-do list every day, and so for me it felt like a similar skill set. But the way I got into it was really just unabated fear and unbridled desperation. I mean, it was 2009. There was no jobs, no one hiring, and I just thought, you know, I knew that sexier businesses like movie business or real estate in New York are very competitive. So I thought, what's sort of the uh, you know less or least sexy side of the business, if you will, and what has recurring revenue, which was management, and that's the short version of how I started.
Okay. So once you started obviously pre-COVID and you're still in the business post-COVID. What are the largest kind of differences that you see now between relationships and tenants and just the management of the buildings? Anything that's a big difference that you're seeing?
The biggest pragmatic difference is definitely uh, having board meetings via Zoom or Google Meets or Microsoft Teams. I mean, it really was it's a big difference for the property managers who, historically maybe you have one meeting at 6 o'clock and one at 8:30 or one at 9, and you're done at 11 o'clock, and then the emails are your inbox is full again at 8 a.m. So just being able to, especially with the seasons and it's hot, it's cold, it's snowing, it's freezing rain. It's just the travel time, being able to have supers take videos and save you a site visit needlessly. Um, it can really make a difference and puts negative downward pressure on payroll.
How's your interaction with tenants changed since COVID?
I don't know. I mean, I'm out of the operation, so I'm not interacting with a lot of residents, although I still take their calls and try to help them out when I can. But I think it's COVID essentially, there weren't a lot of trend buckers, right? Almost all trends just were magnified during COVID, right? The wealth gap, remote work. The only exception to that was a deceleration of urbanization, 300 years of urbanization, or 8,000 years, depending on how you look at it. Um, so I just think it just continued the assault of the age of the consumer. where the expectation levels are that much higher, and people are paying more money than ever for rent in New York City. Obviously, the housing market really has not, volumes down, but the prices are pretty steady considering in terms of the residential housing. So the result is, people are expecting even more when they're paying more, and they should, they deserve it. But I think that's the biggest thing I would see is just their service level expectations have continued to accelerate.
Okay, over the past 5 or 6 years, I've seen a lot of consolidations with property managers. I know tenants get letters informing them of this, um, and I know that you were part of becoming much larger during this period, maybe even a little preceding that. What can you say about what drove that? Is it that it like how you got into it? It was just an area you felt that you could be competitive. What drove the consolidation of current property managers, where it seems like there are less of them and much larger ones?
I think there's a lot of drivers. I think um, for a lot of sellers, the biggest thing is obviously the money. I think it's disingenuous to not say that first and foremost, but it's a type of business that's very difficult to operate and highly investable. It's highly investable because you have a cocktail of recurring revenue, recurring revenue that's very sticky, even though the contracts are cancelable without cause, 30 days notice, 60 days notice. It's high retention rate of clients. So recurring revenue with high retention rate, deconcentrated customer base, so you don't have a lot of risk with any one customer. High collection rate, which is a divergence versus a lot of physical businesses, trades, plumbing, electricians, et cetera. They're always struggling to collect. We don't have that issue. And then you have virtually no risk, as generally service businesses have very little risk because your biggest cost is payroll. So if you ever do lose business, you can always right size your expenses. But the biggest thing is there's really no existential risk, right? There's no technological disruption in the short to intermediate, or even I would say for my career length, I don't see technology. I know people are trying, but replacing the business. If anything, I see it as a tailwind where you're going to have negative pressure again on payroll. Overall, payroll's way up, of course, but it's a downward pressure. It's a mitigator because our employees can work more efficiently. That's part of it. It's highly investable. It's also very fragmented. The average property management company has like 4 W-2 employees. The two largest players in the space in the continent are well under 50% market share, which is unusual for a big market. So you just have that combination of a difficult business to operate, where if you throw hold up a lot of money in front of a seller, and it's a highly investable business that's very attractive for with scale. It's a good combination for consolidation.
So let's talk about the prototypical building that you currently manage. What can you describe that?
Yeah, because that's part of our challenge is we have quite an eclectic portfolio.
Okay.
Most of our competitors, really the history of property management as a business, right, was not corporate, real estate was limited to commercial, not multifamily. Multifamily was considered mom and pop real estate. Technology over time has changed that, where it's a lot easier to track 20,000 units than it used to be. Think about just communicating with residents now with email and text and all this stuff. It's way easier to track and financially analyze, et cetera. So, but in New York specifically, a lot of the management companies you have today are really the children and the grandchildren, literally and figuratively, of a generation where you had multifamily owners, late 70s throughout the 80s, who were converting buildings to co-ops. and they were keeping the management as a way to protect their unsold shares and just look after them, but as an afterthought that it would be one day those contracts would be worth something.
Okay, based on something you had just touched on, you mentioned that you felt that a lot of the prior property management companies were developed off of families that own buildings and
Right.
kind of, used it as a way to consolidate the revenue coming in as well as protect maybe some outstanding shares. I've seen recently where a lot of those properties have sold as part of consolidations for new developments. Are you now seeing kind of those owners leave the market and property as their property management companies as well, and becoming these kind of large developments?
Well, first of all, I mean, with 421 expiring, I don't think you're going to see a lot of new shovels in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the new construction is a niche of ours, one of our many niches. A lot of our formidable competitors do not touch new construction. It's a really tough, whether it's multi or new construction condos, in particular the condos, because it's just a tough combination. You have developer hires us or hires the property management company, and meanwhile, the board, once the sponsors takes over, and you're associated for better or usually for worse with the developer. And so they didn't hire you, so it's just very hard to stay on. And meanwhile, it's not true. It's not so easy to build a building. So the easiest time to operate a building is probably year 3 to year 10 of the lifespan of a building, when all the kinks have been worked out before you're at the end of the useful life of any major mechanicals. And so the first guy in has a tough job. Well, I just had lunch with a friendly competitor, and he said, "We don't touch them." He goes, "You want to be the second guy in," which is a good way to summarize it.
So then, what drives you to be the first? Is it kind of a experience in where you've been retained, or is it just like get in while you can and just do your best?
More the latter than the former. I think, we started with rentals. My original co-founder was very financially oriented and more on the for-profit side of residential real estate. And so I just think we have a good way of talking with developers and speaking their language, maybe more so than some of our competitors. But also, yeah, I mean, we have the staffing business where we provide supers, handy persons, door persons, concierge, security, et cetera. And so with those new construction buildings, you get a high level of service, often comes with 24/7 door attendants. And so it's a big contract for us. And that's really a differentiator from virtually all of our competitors here locally. So we have that competitive advantage, and it's more pronounced on those kinds of accounts.
Okay, so when do you first get engaged? Do you get engaged while before there's shovel on the ground, or well onto when the building's been constructed? And what at what point is better for you?
I mean, like most service businesses, the earlier the better, right? It's competitive, it's highly competitive, so you want to get in early. Usually we've already developed a relationship with that developer over a period of years. But yeah, I mean, at the time of this, we're filming this, it's been raining for 4 straight days in New York, so it's kind of like, when did Noah build the ark? Before the storm. So, we definitely get involved. We usually do the Schedule B work, and then we consult a lot on the Schedule A work, which is in the offering plan, of course.
Yeah.
And that's we're involved well before typically construction starts.
Okay, so obviously you helped build this company, so there's a huge entrepreneurial side in you. Talk a little bit about what drives you, and if it's not real estate, if it's not property management, what drives you to create a company and keep operating?
I think fear is something that all entrepreneurs need to have. If you're not afraid a little bit, fear is still the best motivator. I try to breathe that in. It's hard when you're not afraid, but I think Look, the way I started, I answered the first part of your question, but the first group I got hired on, I was living on my brother's futon, my only brother, younger than me, in Fort Lee, New Jersey, and I didn't have a job. The world was crumbling all around as far as the financial world, Lehman Brothers, etc. Met these three owners from cardiology practice. They had bought three properties, small properties, 5 units, and they said, "Tell us about your business." And I said, "Well, I started 10 minutes ago." And they were like, "What?" Yeah, they're like, "Oh, did you leave a big management company?" And I said, "No, I have zero experience, no experience whatsoever." And they were aghast. We were meeting at, I remember we met at the what was then called the Trump Soho, and I said, "But wait," they were like getting up to leave. I'm like, "Number one, you haven't heard my pitch." I'm like, number one, we're going to work hard. We'll be our own client to start, right? Number two, we think we're reasonably bright. We know we're honest. And by the way, we'll do it for free. And we've looked at your financials. It looks like you could use that right about now. And so that was how we got hired.
Okay,
First.
that sounds pretty unorthodox of a
Yeah.
pitch that
Yeah.
I've heard. Then at what point? So you take a huge risk, okay? And as an attorney, most attorneys are very risk adverse. So to me, to hear that you've taken a huge risk, you've kind of thrown it down. At what point did you realize I got this? And it might have been like a year, 2 years down, where you're like, I got this. We're going to keep growing this.
I didn't feel secure until the day I sold the business and the wire hit my account. I never felt. I always felt uncomfortable. You're always anticipating. If you're a good entrepreneur, uh, as you know, I'm the son of an attorney.
Yeah.
So I tend to think risk first.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a real misconception that good entrepreneurs are considered risk takers. I don't consider myself a risk taker.
Okay.
Uh, the way I look at it is most humans in this country, if you did a risk level of 1 to 10, most of you guys are living at 1, 1.5, 2, right? All I'm doing is living at 3. I'm not at 9 or 10, right? I'm not the guy like, doing wild stunts and stuff. I'm just taking a little more risk than most people. But to me, they're calculated risks, and they're over a long period of time, those risks will pay off. Not all of them will pay off, but most of them will. And so I don't even, if you think about it like from a venture capital, most venture capital firms are doing 6% of their deals, right? If they're professional venture capitalists, they just have to hit big, get a 50x on one deal. So I don't play in that world, but like the way I look at it, I'm taking a lot of good risks that are likely to pay off. Some of them won't, but I don't want to. I'm always going to leave my wallet. If I go downstairs from the hotel room and I realize I left my wallet out, I will never go back and get that and put it in a safe or whatever. I'll never put my passport in the safe. To me, that's an inconvenience that 999 times out of 1,000 that passport will be there, and the time involved, the hassle to go back up, to call the restaurant or go online, tell the restaurant you're running late, tell the other couple you're running late, feel the angst. I'd rather have my passport stolen once, and when it gets stolen, my heart rate does not change. I'm aware that I took that risk and that most of the time it will pay off. I'm aware it's going to stink that time, but that's just how I orient to the world.
I want to go back to something you mentioned a little earlier, talking about technology. That there's been certain limitations within the property management, technology and various apps have been introduced, and then you touched upon the fact that you said it's still easier with technology to track larger pools of tenants.
Right.
So, because I've seen, I've gone to vendor conferences and stuff, and you got the ICSC, and there's a lot of vendors pitching new technology apps, and it's a very entrepreneurial area. Are there any on the horizon? Like what are you seeing that could develop? And maybe is there an area within technology that you're just waiting for someone to create?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is the operative term right now, but if we can cut down, if the AI can get good enough where we can cut down on human interaction,
Okay.
it has to get really good. I don't think it's good enough yet because it's not what the customer wants, right? The customer I also said earlier that it's the age of the consumer. The consumer service expectations are higher than ever, but technology is the McDonald's. It's not going to make the best burger, but it's cheaper and faster, right? So it's not technology. AI is not saying we're going to be better than Adam Sanders at editing a contract. I'd always pay a lot more for Sanders than for AI. But if I can get AI a certain amount cheaper, it becomes more attractive, right? So what I'd like to see is something like Chat GBT, which I know some of my colleagues both here and elsewhere use, but I like you have to use it and then still edit it, right? So I'd like to get it to a point where it could be chatbots, it could be where it's not we're not Bank of America, right? So if you go on a chat with Bank of America, you're expecting a certain service level. That's not what we're trying to provide. We're trying to provide people are expecting for their high price shelter, white glove service. So that doesn't jive well with AI where it is now, but I'd love to see it get a little farther along.
So where do you see yourself developing, your companies over the next few years right now?
I mean, I think it's still very ripe for acquisition. Our debt is locked in. But even with higher debt, it's different than real estate. When
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about an operating business, real estate people are borrowing 60%, 80%. On the private equity side, on the strategic domestic side, you can borrow a lot more because you have, cash flow that's more liquid, right? Real estate, you have to sell the building. So multiples are still very attractive, right? A seller can sell for three, depending on the scale, 3, 6, 10 times what their business is worth. And if you look at where our the public company that's our main competitor is, they're trading for many, many times more than that. So that's a big arbitrage where I acquired, first 8 years we grew organically. The years directly before I sold, we grew inorganically as well as organically, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what we continue to do in my role as trying to acquire competitors here locally.
Okay, so based on what you're just talking about, how do you see yourself when you describe what you do? Do you say property management or do you say private equity?
Well, I mean, private equity gets tossed around, right? So we're a
Yes.
private company. So is that private money? Sure, but I mean, it's not private equity in the sense that the only companies that sell to us and the only companies we buy are property management or related type of businesses. So they might have a brokerage component, they might have a building staffing component, they might have a maintenance component, et cetera. But we're really only looking to buy. That's the only space we know. The founder of the parent company was a property manager and ran a property management company for decades before he started really aggressively buying companies. So yeah, I would say we're technically a domestic strategic based in the U.S. and more strategic player.
So you're looking to do vertically integrate and then combine a bunch of companies into kind of a
Not
one.
combined. Yeah, not combined. It's everyone says that.
Okay.
It makes sense, sort of conceptually on a superficial level, but the property management business has so much friction, and I've seen this firsthand that when I combined operations, it was brutal. You're going to lose either a client you really don't want to lose, or an employee you don't really want to lose, or some combination of the two. There's no way out of that. And then you think about, as we discussed, it's such a payroll heavy. 85 cents of every dollar we spend is on payroll. 75 cents of every gross dollar we make is on payroll. So that's before technology, before insurance, before marketing and advertising, before office expenses, before all of that, and then before profit, we've already spent 75 cents on employer burden. So ultimately, we really need to find creative ways to keep our staff down. So you're seeing a flight to virtual employees for entry-level positions. And yeah.
So it sounds like a balance between economies of scale and allowing these companies to maintain their own independence to avoid
Yeah,
their.
there's really not, it's really mostly the latter because you're not, if we combine, there's 5 companies, I think going on 6, knock on wood, uh, you know, here in New York City. And if we combine, we'd save a little bit on office expense. Office expense has gotten way cheaper. We'd save maybe on a receptionist or 2. We'd still need the same number of property managers, the same number of property accountants. And actually, our company tried doing this previously years ago, and it didn't work well, the parent company. So it's a very different model than our main competitor in that they just let successful businesses continue to be successful. It's not an expense reduction. It's really on the capital side, as I alluded to, where the scale itself makes the business worth more. Said differently, the same amount of profit, if you can aggregate it, makes a business worth a lot more than if that profit is divided up into different entities.
Okay, so let's wrap this up, and I'm gonna go to something more to where we grew up, and ask you 2 quick rapid fire questions.
Mm-hmm.
Nationals or Orioles?
Orioles.
Still an Orioles fan. Okay.
Yeah, I grew up, there were no Nationals, so
Yeah.
it's a little easier this year, but it's also just, I love New York, so I like that part of the Yankees, but I don't want to say I like the Yankees.
I get it. Okay. Commanders or Washington football team?
That's like choosing between 2 horrible options, but I was thinking of an inappropriate metaphor. But I would go with the Washington football team, and I would further say that I would not be surprised to see them change the name before.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think they'll eventually change it again. But as a fan of the Nationals and the Commanders, I'm definitely a homer. So anyway, again, I want to thank Michael Feldman for joining us on the podcast today. Below in the notes, you'll be able to see his information and ways you can contact him if you have any questions, as well as my contact information if you have any questions as well. Thank you very much, and happy that you keep responding to the podcast. Take care.